Let's make an inexpensive and easy DIY worm bin. I'm a big fan of DIY worm bins because you can tailor it to exactly the ideal environment for the worms. And a lot of the ones you can find online, they are made without really the worms taken into account. It's more for aesthetics and ease of use by the person. Right now, I'm at Walmart getting an 18-gallon tote for less than $12. I'm grabbing an extra lid to put underneath my bin, but it's not necessary. The first thing I'm going to do, creating my new worm bin, is get some shredded paper soaking in water for at least 10 minutes. In the past, I've asked my neighbors to save their shredded paper for me, but inevitably credit cards almost always end up in there, so I bought my own paper shredder. Off of Amazon, it's not that expensive. To make your worm bin, turn it upside down, grab a 1/4-inch drill bit, and put 6 holes in the bottom of the bin. Now remember, whatever bin you're using, make sure it is not clear. You want a dark environment for the worms. And I'm making sure to put the holes on what are the lowest points of the bottom of the bin. A properly balanced bin is not going to have any extra liquid to drain out, but this is especially good for first-time worm bin owners because we typically like to overfeed our worms. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a small drill bit, it doesn't matter what size, and I'm going to put these tiny holes right below the lip of the bin, about 1 inch apart, all the way around. This is where the second lid comes in. This is where it can catch any drainage liquid. I, however, have always put a piece of cardboard underneath mine instead of getting a second lid. The worms are going to need some type of bedding. Some people say use cocoa coir, some people say use soaked shredded paper, some people say use leaves, like dry fall leaves. But remember, if it's going to be indoors, the leaves could have bugs that come in with them. Just something to think about. I'm going to fill the bin up about halfway, and I'm going to put some food in for them. These are shredded carrots, and I'm going to add some used coffee grounds for grit. It helps the worms digest the things that they're consuming. If you are starting a new bin, you have likely ordered worms in the mail and you are ready to just add them directly to your bin. But I have divided the worms from my current bin because they have reproduced a lot, and I feel like I could benefit from a second worm bin at this point with my worm population. A good rule of thumb for a bin this size is to purchase 1,000 red wiggler worms, and you want specifically the Icenia fetidae. Those are the types of worms that don't mind being in captivity. They're not going to try and escape, and they are powerhouses when it comes to going through kitchen scraps. Now I'm going to cover up the worms and the food with more of the bedding. Again, I'm using the soaked shredded paper. You never want to add liquid to your bin directly. You want to soak the bedding, and that's how you would add moisture if your bin is too dry. The last step is to put the lid on, and you'll notice there are no holes in the lid. You don't want any holes in the lid because you don't want too much air in your bin. You don't want your worms or the bedding drying out. I keep my worm bins in my garage because it doesn't get too hot or too cold. Like us, worms like to be about 70 degrees. When you open up your worm bin, in the first few days after you've added your new worms, they might be trying to escape as they acclimate. But once they've acclimated, a good rule of thumb is you don't want to see more than 6 worms outside of the bedding area, for instance, crawling on the sides of the bin. I just checked to see if the worms had eaten all of the food, and they had, so I'm going to add some of my bokashi ferment to the worm bin. I've done this in the past, and the worms love it. After I've added the food scraps, I'm going to make sure to cover them up really well. This reduces the chance of things like fruit flies. I'm also going to add some fall leaves to the top of my bin. My worms really love it when I've topped them up with fall leaves, and since the bin is not inside my house, I'm not worried about bugs. I check my worm bin every week and add food as needed.